Hello, Mark Red Larson here for the Dreamcatcher podcast. Thanks for joining us today. My guest is Michael Krings. How are you doing, Michael?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Got my drink and everything, and I'm ready for the day.
Cool.
So Michael, little background. Where you from? Where do you live? And
I'm a lifelong Nebraskan. Grew up here. Went to school down in Lincoln at the university. Ended up
okay,
getting my master's degree down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, at the University of Alabama. Lived there for a few years before coming back and raising my family here. I've lived in Hastings for about 20 years and recently took over as the city administrator and economic development director in Minden here.
okay. Is that something that was kind of a dream or something you wanted to do, or was this a direction you were planning on going eventually?
No, I don't think I don't think many people can say they go the path that they
True.
planned on from the beginning. Really
Yeah.
started getting involved in local government. It's probably been 15 years ago. I was spent 8 years on the city council in Hastings.
Wow.
Really enjoyed
Wow.
that. Um, Enjoyed, you know, getting involved in local projects and activities and working to make the community a better place. And spent the last 5 to 6 years working in economic development over in Minden. And then
Awesome.
recently had an opportunity then to come over to Minden and kind of work both roles, which is kind of unique in working as a city administrator and kind of helping making sure the city is functioning properly, but also working in local economic development here in Minden. And there's probably it's probably been 15 years since Minden has had a dedicated emphasis on economic development. So really
Wow.
enjoying kind of bringing that back to life and putting more emphasis on that going forward as a community.
Very cool. And for the audience that's listening, this is Minden, Nebraska, South Central Nebraska,
Yeah.
and Minden is. It's actually where I graduated high school. I love Minden dearly. It's Christmas City, and I love Christmas, so that kind of helps with me loving it a little bit too. So Michael, I know you did. You said you worked at the Y, or you ran the Y over at Hastings, which I'm in that city quite a lot too, and so was how was that jumping from doing that to what you're doing now? Was that similar?
In some ways, yeah. So when I was down in Alabama, I was the manager of the campus recreation center. There was a large indoor
Okay.
outdoor recreation facility for the students, the staff, and the community of Tuscaloosa. And so when we had our daughter, we were looking for my wife and I were looking for an opportunity to get closer to our family. And
Hmm.
so an opportunity came up in Hastings, and it transitioned well there from managing recreational type facilities, managing recreational programs, sports programs, health and wellness programs, and things like that. So that transition was pretty easy.
Okay.
The transition
Okay.
into economic development from that was a little more difficult, but I will say where there are a lot of similarities, it's about building relationships. And
Yes.
when I ran the Y, especially when I started, I was scared really of the concept of fundraising. A lot of people I
Oh,
think
okay.
have never got involved in it. It kind of scares them asking people for money, but honestly, I really enjoyed it because it's really just about sharing what the mission of the organization is, what we're trying to accomplish, and what we do for the community. And when you have an organization like the YMCA in a community like Hastings, it's really, I learned really quickly that it's a matter of when you sit down and have a conversation with somebody, you ask them how that organization impacted their lives. And in an organization like the
Yeah.
Y, everybody is impacted in some way, shape, or form. So either
True.
they use it by accessing the facility themselves, their kids grew up in Y sports or after school programming, their parents are remaining active by doing it. So everybody in some way, shape, or form, either directly or indirectly, is impacted by that organization. So I would just sit back and say, what does the Y mean to you? And
Hmm.
then you would spend, however long of that individual really telling you what it means to them, and it's different for everybody, right? But
Sure.
they started convincing themselves of why the organization was so important. So it really became sort of fun and kind of easy once they've explained what impact that organization had on them. It was really easy to make the case of how do we grow that and expand that to make sure we have that
Right.
positive impact on everybody. And so it was really fun. I met everybody in town that way.
Yeah. Yes.
Especially the community leaders. Saw a lot of generosity there. We grew our annual campaign, our annual support enormously during my time there. And now they've transitioned it since I left into a brand new big old facility that's just beautiful and
Yeah. It's amazing.
continuing to grow and build on that. So that was pretty cool. The transition then to, I mean, it led pretty well while I was on at the YMCA. That was when I started, and when I sat on the city council, and that really
Okay.
worked well because I built all those relationships through fundraising and getting to know all the people that come through the door of the YMCA, and so I just got to know a lot of people in town, and so it worked really well, and from a political standpoint. And then the transition into economic development, very similar in that sense. It's really about building relationships with in economic development, it's mostly with the business leaders. So going into all the major corporations, the
Right.
banks, the industrial, the manufacturing facilities in town, and just a lot of what economic development is understanding the challenges that your local businesses face, and then you sort of
Yes.
serve as that liaison to either one, help them through what challenges they may face, or two, help them grow their business through an expansion project or whatever, and then serving as that liaison between the state and federal level for different funding opportunities. I always told people, you just let me know what keeps you up at night as a business owner or as a business
Right.
leader.
Right.
And I probably don't know the answer. I know I won't know the answer, but I can probably find somebody who does know the answer. And so
Exactly.
connecting
Yes.
them with the people at the state, regional, or local level that can kind of help them, whether that, once again, if it's a challenge they're facing, or if it's their things are going really well and now they're looking at, okay, I need to add people, I need to add square footage, I need to add equipment, and how do we do that? How do we navigate that? So that transition worked pretty well. Working from a nonprofit, and I say nonprofit, I mean a community center. I mean everybody in the
Right.
community understood that organization,
Exactly.
and then yeah, continuing to build those relationships through economic development was really important.
So what you learned over there, are you able to carry over to where you are at in Minden
Yeah, I
here?
mean a lot of it. I sitting on the elected official side is obviously much different than sitting
Sure.
on the
Right.
city staff side. But I think that did give me a lot of perspective to sit on that side of the table where I understood a lot of what goes into municipal government by serving on the city council and doing all
Hmm.
that. But then, yeah, continuing that with those relationships I build, that's ultimately what city government is as well. I mean, our customers are the citizens of Minden, and
True. Very true.
I continue to try to work on building relationships with everyone in the community, especially our local area businesses, and understanding what challenges they have, what concerns they
Yep.
have, and how we as local government can help them. So the the dynamic of economic development and city government is a little challenging, but it's kind of how a smaller community has to work, right? We just don't have the
Sure.
resources to go out and hire a full-time economic development person and a full-time city administrator separately. A lot of what we do in a community the size of Minden, we wear a lot of hats. It's
Oh,
one
yeah,
day you're
sure.
working on finance, one day you're working on HR, the other day you're working on, you know, cat overpopulation and all the things that
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm
yeah.
sure
So
you
I
probably
would
comes up
say
with a lot of things you're,
I would
yeah,
say the biggest challenge I'm facing here, and it's not a, I mean, it's understandable. I get it, but everybody has a different concern or an issue
sure.
in their local
Yeah.
community, whether it's water quality or streets or sidewalks or cats
Yes.
or
Yes.
amenities that we do or don't have, 100-year old pool, those kind of things. And you
Yeah.
really have to be effective in local government. You have to be receptive to those concerns, even though
Yep.
you in or myself and sitting in this seat have to look at it from a totality standpoint. Like, yeah, I get it. That street needs fixed. Um, this street needs fixed. That ball field
Right.
needs upgrading. That pool needs this.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
obviously we can't do it all. So you still have to be
Exactly. Yes.
receptive to the concerns that people have. But then you have to sort of pull back and prioritize how, as local government, you're going to attack the challenges that are facing the community.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I know when we talked the other day, I mean, Minden, Minden is situated in a great place. It's a very much a growing place in Nebraska. Actually, where the community I'm at is very much growing. And the one in Hastings we were talking about, kind of we're situated in a perfect place, kind of like the other day where you said a bedroom community, but a very good way to look at a bedroom community where we can grow. And we've kind of, I think probably because we didn't have the what needed to be done in the past to grow. But so that's, I know the other day when we talked, you have all kinds of ideas and things about Minden. And I mean, with our city doing the Christmas pageant and everything that we do every year, building on that. So what are some things in Minden? I know you really want to get, we talked about with the Y the other day and the pool and doing stuff like that. So what are some things that you would like to see in Minden in maybe the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it, but one of the biggest challenges that a community like Minden faces is that we're 20 minutes from Kearney, we're 30 minutes from Hastings, and we're 20
Yes.
minutes from Holdridge. And
Yep.
so it's difficult to attract business and companies to a community when, you know, some of the, restaurants is a perfect example. We continue to try to
Right.
add opportunities for people to have places to eat in Minden, and we're 15 minutes away from some of the best restaurants in Nebraska, right up on the
True.
interstate with what
Right. Right.
Mr. Giannis has done up there. I mean, just some great restaurants, great
Yes.
hotels, all those things are just right there. I mean, that's nothing anymore to drive 15 minutes for to go out to eat. I mean, most people in
True.
large communities, they stay in their community and it takes them a heck of a lot longer to
Oh
get
yes.
across
By a
Omaha
long
in
ways.
15 minutes to enjoy some of those
Yeah.
amenities. So that's one of our biggest challenge. But on the flip side, that's our biggest opportunity as well, is to
Yes.
take
Yes.
advantage of our location and where we're at between Lincoln, or I mean Kearney, Omaha, or Kearney, Hastings, and Holdridge. Um, I think we need to continue to sell the concept that if those things, if the amenities and offerings that are in those communities are important to you, we're close enough to where you can take advantage of those. But if you want a different little bit of a different quality of life, you want to step back and maybe be
Yes.
able to walk across town to your neighborhoods, and we have great schools, we have great health care right here in Minden,
Yes.
we have the quality of life is second to none. We have, I mean,
Exactly.
it's a safe, well, able to travel community. So it's, if that's what you is important to you, but you want to be close enough to take advantage of those amenities, that's what we have to offer. And I think we need to continue to play on that. So after that, I
Yes.
think, some of our priorities currently that we're working on. While Minden is a quaint little, I mean, it's just an adorable little town, especially with the
It is.
square and some of the
Yes.
homes and all that kind of stuff. There are some areas, I think all communities, not Minden is not unique, but
True.
there's some areas in some neighborhoods that are in disrepair, that I sort of think create challenges for us to um, continuing to grow the community. So we want to really work on some of our, I'd call it, uh, rundown neighborhoods or properties. And when we say neighborhoods in Minden, you're talking, a handful of homes here and there that
Yeah.
are
Yeah. It's
100
not
years old that need
right.
some
Right.
work. And how do we address that? And to be fair, I mean, we've got some gravel streets yet. We've got some different things that we need to focus on as a local government, and so we're focusing a lot on that. So
Yes.
working on cleaning up some of the areas in town, that because there's so many areas that are so
Perfect.
beautiful and so nice that we want
Very
the
nice.
entire
Yes.
community to be that way. So we're
Yeah.
working on that. We're continuing to work on some of our emphasis now is, I mean, the biggest challenges facing Minden are childcare and housing, making sure that we have enough spots for the people. We want
I
young
believe it.
families moving here, and if it's a
Exactly. Yeah.
2 year wait list to get their child into childcare, that's going to pose some
Wow.
problems. And so we have, I think the last study we did, we have about 60 um, kids that want to be in childcare or early childhood education and don't have spots, and so we need to grow our
Wow.
capacity. And so we are as of I think a couple years ago, I think is when it happened. We became a C4K community for kids community,
Okay.
and there's some funding at the state level that provides some planning and around how do we address the quantity and quality of childcare in our community. So there's a whole
Right.
big initiative and a group of people working on that.
Awesome.
And then housing, obviously, I think this is a statewide, region-wide, probably even nationwide problem.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The governor, we've been working. He has a new initiative called Six Regions, One Nebraska, in which we're taking a regional approach to economic development, and we Minden and myself and Josh Jorgensen with the chamber have been involved in those discussions and those initiatives. And our region has identified childcare, housing, and workforce as our main issues. And so we're continuing to work in a regional perspective of how do we add housing stock to our local communities. We're lucky. We just completed a new 35 lot housing development in Minden, so we have lots available,
Yes.
ready for people to build.
Yes. Yes.
But we need to continue to be proactive and have opportunities. If
True.
people want to live in Minden, we want to have a place for them. Right now, I think I was actually looking earlier because I saw a local realtor had put a local house on the market, and it always
Okay.
piques my interest. I'm like, oh yeah, so
Sure.
I
Right.
jump on
Right.
the internet and figure out, okay, how
Yeah.
many do we have? I think we have right now maybe five houses for sale, which
Oh,
is not
wow.
that much at all. And
No,
I
it's
think
not.
a couple of them are what you would call on the higher end, probably price out
Okay.
a lot of people. And so we need to continue to look at how we add housing. And I would say right now, if you wanted a rental in Minden, you probably couldn't find one. And so we have to fix that
Yeah.
problem.
Not,
If people want to live in
not
Minden,
good.
we're going to sell the idea that if you want to work in some of these other communities because that's where your job is, or you can work from home, or you can work remote, but you want to live in a community like Minden, we want you here. Well, wanting them here and having a place for them to live are two
Yeah.
different
It's
things.
yeah.
And so we got to be
Yeah.
aggressive on how we look at new housing development, how we look at infill housing, which means some of these distressed neighborhoods with vacant
Okay.
properties or rundown properties. How do we get them back on the market? And then multi or what a dense population type housing, which is looking at duplexes, quads, apartment
Okay.
complexes, and things like that. So we need to really be aggressive there and looking at housing and childcare. And then the final piece, we've been over the years, we continue to do comprehensive planning, and we have a
Okay.
lot of conversation with the community. We bring them all together and really listen to what concerns they have. And we right now do not have a wellness facility in Minden, and so having a place for people to go if they want to, jump on a
Yes.
bike
Yes.
or lift some weights
Yes.
or go
Important.
to
Yes.
a studio class and with their friends and family
Exactly.
and do some classes there to make. We want to have an opportunity to have that available to them. And then, back to my background at the Y, that's not only good for the health of our community, but it builds relationships. I mean, you go in there, a lot of what
Very true. Yes.
YMCA was when you were done working out or lifting weights and you sat and have coffee and water and soda with
Yes.
your friends and family and visited
Exactly.
with them.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think that we face as a society right now with technology, with COVID and everything we went through is um, just conversations. Like, how do we talk to our neighbors and build relationships with our
Exactly.
neighbors?
Yes.
So much of what we do as a society is behind a screen that we got to get the
And
heck out of from behind our screens and hang out with our neighbors and all those kind of things. It was funny when I first started here about 18 months ago. Somebody had called the office at the city hall and asked if they could
hmm
block off their block and do a block party. And so,
Oh, okay.
the staff came in here and were like, "What are your thoughts on that?" I said, "Not
Yeah.
only should we allow that, we should make that process as easy as possible, and then we should promote that because the world needs more block parties.
Cool.
The world needs
Amen.
more." throwing the grill
Yes.
out in the front driveway, getting some
Period. Yes.
bags
Amen.
tossing and some, whatever, and getting your neighbors that you maybe don't talk to as much anymore, and just hanging out and visiting and building relationships. I think a
Yes.
lot of the
So
problems we face as a society, um, I'm not saying it'd solve them, but it would help a lot if we just get out
agree.
from behind our screens and get to know our neighbors and our community a
Yes.
little bit better. And
Yes.
so, having a place that you can go and get healthy if that's what you want to do, but you want to build relationships with your community by hanging out and visiting and getting to know your neighbors, I think would be a big part of that. So those are kind of
Yeah.
the three big things we're
Yeah.
focusing on: housing, childcare, and then health and well-being, not just physically but mentally as well.
Very cool. And talking about getting out from behind the screen, we have second to none, like an opera house in Minden, go in. There's so many people that I talked to in Minden that had never been in there. And it's like you have something that, I mean, most communities dream of. And then Pioneer Village. It has had its, problems, but it's back on the rise. I mean,
Absolutely.
they're really trying to get into the 21st century. And another place where you don't find a lot of that stuff, one of a kind there is getting out behind the screen and then the Christmas thing, which going back to that, that's one of my favorite things. I have such good childhood memories of that. And the fact that Minden, when you go see that square when it's lit up at Christmas time, I mean, you don't get that online. You just don't get that wow. And
Yeah.
I am so thankful Minden still does that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think, I mean, it's hard to oversell what our square looks like during Christmas. I mean, you try to explain to
true.
people what it is, but you really explaining it
It
doesn't do it justice.
does
There's
not.
places, there's probably communities that have more lights than Minden, but not in as
Yeah.
dense of probably an area.
No,
In a city square
no,
block,
it's
the amount,
amazing.
what I think it's 10,000 lights we string up from our courthouse. I mean,
Yep.
it's honestly
Yeah.
breathtaking. And so
It
I
is.
think
Yeah.
one, we all need to get out from behind our screens and go hang out
Yes.
and use that beauty and that, that time of year, to build more relationships with our community. But I also think people across the state, the region, across the country, I don't think they can even fathom what it's like down here. We were lucky last Christmas to have CBS, no, NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt
Yeah.
sent
Yes. Yes.
somebody down and did a story on it. And these are people coming in from New York and all over the
Yeah.
place, and they're just blown away by this little town in the middle of Nebraska and the beauty and
Yep.
the what we celebrate with our pageants and reenacting that again, and bringing all that back to life is just
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, the history, and then thinking people, because we're kind of the flyover, area
Right.
that most people think, and there's something down there. 'Cause, I mean, that's the thing. I talked to Nebraska, and it's like, what's there? It's like, there's a lot in Nebraska, but there's a lot anywhere.
Right.
You just don't dismiss a place before you go to it. And no, Minden, Central Nebraska. I mean, it's I've lived at other places, and I can tell you, I love this area. I mean, it's just, and the people are still, you still know your neighbors. I mean, and I did find that, but cities, and I think it's getting even here too much behind the screen time. And but it's just it's a high quality life. It's
Yeah.
really high quality of life,
Yeah, being
and
involved in economic development the last 8 years or so, and understanding from a business recruitment standpoint, how do we bring people into Nebraska? How do we bring people into Minden?
yes,
Having a lot of conversations, let's say at the state chamber of commerce level, and they'll always tell you the hardest thing to do is to get people on the plane when there's an
I agree
opportunity
with
in
you.
Nebraska,
Yep,
because there's a preconceived notion out there that there's
yes,
nothing there, and it's the quality of life is not that great. But once people get on the plane, if they step foot in Nebraska, it kind of, I think we
Mm,
surprise a lot of people, because yeah,
very
we
much
don't have some of the things that these large cities
true.
have, but our quality of life is second to none. And I
Yeah,
remember
I agree.
fundraising. A gentleman out of in Hastings named Ken Morrison had companies all over the world. Um, just a lot of reach, and traveled the world for these companies, and he always told me, Michael, when I love to go to those places, I love to experience what they have to offer, but man, I sure love when I get back home because
Oh, I
it's
can
a
relate.
different pace and it's just a
Yes,
different way of living.
it
It's
is.
just I don't want to say slow because that sounds bad, but it's just calming. There's just
It
a
is. It
calm,
is. It
you
it is
know.
very calm. Yeah.
I can drive. I always joke to people because I've got friends in Omaha and Lincoln, and I said, yeah, I've got a 30-minute commute to work, and they're like, oh, really? How far is that? I go 30 miles. In
Uh-huh.
Omaha, you go 30 minutes, you've made maybe 15 miles if you're lucky,
Yes.
if that.
Oh, yes.
And so here you can just get on the road
Yep.
and go and relax. You don't have to worry about bumper to bumper. You don't have to
Yep.
worry about,
That's my
just
kind of commute.
we don't have a lot of poverty in outstate Nebraska. It's
No,
just a clean, calming, nice quality life. When we first
it
moved to
is.
Hastings, I thought, well, obviously this will be a stepping stone. Then we're going to get somewhere bigger.
Right.
And after raising my family here out in central Nebraska, there's no way I would want to
Yep.
go anywhere else
Agreed.
because it was a great place to raise our kids. Um,
Yep.
and we can always pop over to Lincoln and Omaha or
You
Kansas City,
can
Denver if we
quickly.
want to take advantage of those things. But then we get to come home, and this
Yes.
is the great place to come home to.
Yep. That's kind of like I can get on a plane right here where I'm at, Kearney, very quickly and be to wherever I need to be, and then I can come home.
Yep.
So, and I don't know. I don't know how people do it in the city.
Yeah.
I have
You get used to
relatives.
what I guess what you get used to it, whatever
Yep.
is important to you. But I've gotten
Yep.
used to Central Nebraska, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
No, me either. I agree with you 100%. So Michael, before we end the podcast, is there anything else you would like the audience to know?
Not really. I mean, Minden has a lot of opportunities in front of us, but we have a lot of challenges, just like everybody else. And I think one of the biggest things we face is trying to do too much too soon because then it becomes unsustainable, and so it's going to take time. I
Yep.
wish we had a economic development effort here in town 20 years ago, but I think 20 years from now, this community is going to be really happy that we did this now,
Yes.
that we started this
Yes.
effort,
Yep.
that we started identifying properties to bring back to life some of these old buildings in downtown Minden, putting some new life
Yes. Of
into
course.
them, getting
Yep.
some state and federal funding because it just takes so much to do that. But we're
Oh,
starting to see
yes.
that happening here in Minden, and it's going to take some time. But I think overall, we're really building something special here. That one of our newest mantras is close to the action, far from the noise. So we're close to any
That
action
is
you
perfect.
want here in Minden, but we're far from all
Yep.
the noise and
Yep.
challenges that some of those other communities face. And so we really are starting to embrace our niche. And I think a lot of the success of a community, you can do all you want at local government, you can do all you want in
Right.
economic development, all that. But it's really if the people in the community have a passion, because when the day is done, we need people to step up and serve on boards and
Yes.
volunteer
Yes.
in different
Exactly.
efforts. And I mean, you're seeing that at Pioneer Village. You mentioned that they're really
Yes.
bringing that back to life. But there's a lot of
They are.
people putting a lot of blood, a
Oh,
lot of
yes.
sweat, and a lot of money into that effort, and
Yes.
it's starting to pay off. And so
It
it's going to
is.
take time, but I think we have a community that's passionate about Minden, and I think that's going to really parlay into something special as we move forward.
Okay. No, that is great. And it is, I mean, Minden's on the move upward. It really is. Kind of being stagnated for a while. It's just you can just see it all the way around. And yeah,
Yep.
I think people feel it too on
Yep.
everything. So, well, Michael, I will end the podcast there. Thanks for joining us on the Dreamcatcher podcast. And I look forward to maybe doing a follow-up when maybe in a few years or something like that and
Yep.
see how everything's going.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for having me.
but yeah, and thanks for being our guest and have a good rest of your
All
day
right.
and we'll talk soon.
You bet. Thanks.